This is Last Blitzkrieg from MMP Games. It's part of the Battalion Combat series. This is an introductory video. What we'll do is we'll just have a quick look at the footprint of the game. So it's quite big. This is a 9 foot by 4 foot table, though I reckon you could easily get this on a 7 foot by 4 foot table. With a bit of messing around. You'd have to put a few things like your counter trays and maybe your rule books off to one side, because the main thing is it's quite a big map, as you can see. It is a fairly big map covering the whole Ardennes area. You've got Germany over here, Luxembourg down here, Belgium. You've even got parts of France over there across the Meuse River. Now, it's an interesting battle, this one. It's one I've always wanted to play, but I did have an attempt to play Time for Trumpets, but I didn't really like that and I didn't get very far with it. Mainly because it had too many units. I think there's at least 3 times the number of units in that game as there are in this one. And it also had a very, very fiddly combat system, in the fact there was something like 15 different factors that could go into a dice roll. It was hard to remember. Anyway, I didn't get very far with it and abandoned it fairly quickly. Now this one, the fact that it's the BCS system, and I've played Valley of Tears, which is a BCS game, means I'm not going to have any sort of rule shock going on here, because I know the rules is reasonably. I don't profess to be an expert on BCS by any means, but I know how to play it. Let's put it that way. Right, we'll have a look at a few things on the map. Now, what I've done is I'm currently not using the unit cards. People have created unit cards on Board Game Geek and stuff that you can print off. Now, I probably will print those off and create the cards and see how I get on with them. But I did manage in Valley of the Tears not to actually need the cards. But they are more convenient, because occasionally when the game sort of gets in the way of where your HQ is, you end up having to move counters around and things to make room. And if you have the cards, you can push that all off to one side. I've put the German and American, well, should be Allied really, victory points, hexes. I've marked them. So the ones with the yellow counters here, these are the just American victory point counters. If it's got a green one, it's either just the German or German and American, just so I can see what the Germans are really trying to do. And you can see that the idea is basically to get to the Meuse River. So you're really pushing up this line here, rather than going straight for the Meuse over here. You are pushing to the northwest, and the idea is that, as the original offensive was, this was just the first stage of the offensive, which was to reach the Meuse, and once you got the Meuse crossing and everything secured, was to go on and actually take Antwerp. Now, historically, the Germans haven't got the remotest chance of getting to Antwerp, and that's not even part of this game. What the game out of the box does, it takes you to the 31st of January, but I've actually got the counters and rules to extend it to into the first 2 weeks of January. Whether I play that extension, it depends on how the game goes. We've got elements of 3 German. Well, at this particular point in time, there are elements of 3 German armies facing 2 American corps. And these American corps are, as people probably know, they really thinly stretched out. The Americans had been using this area as a rest and recuperation area, and they'd also been selectively pulling units off out of this area, the front, to support operations in other areas, like what was going on down south here with the Third Army. So the Americans are very exposed here, but the Germans are coming through the Ardennes much in the same way as they did in 1940. Yet it's different this time. There's going to be problems, and the problems are going to be traffic jams and supply mixing and crossing and a few other things, because some of the German units are buddies. They're marked so I don't forget them. There's a few buddy units there, and there's a few American buddy units as well. Buddy units basically don't suffer the negative effects of having sharing a supply line or operating inside the perimeter or blob, as they call it in this game, of another unit. There's some special rules. These blue counters I've got down here they just mark the rubber boats rule, which is in place for turn 1, which allows the Germans to cross this river here without penalty on the first turn. Now, just to remember that these rivers here are rivers. They are not major rivers. There's only one major river, and that's the Meuse, which is right away over here. Okay, so it's important to remember that, because a major river has different effects on movement. But even so, these rivers are a major obstacle to armoured formations to try and cross, because it's effectively prohibited. Now what you do get here is there's these markers here that say the bridge not open. Now these, very much like Valley of Tears, these represent bridges that were put in place by the Germans on the first day. So they're not there on the first day, but on the second day they become fully functional bridges, and there's no way the Allies can stop that. And there's quite a few of them going all the way up the Saar River here, if that's the right pronunciation. And then we've got the Ur River there, where there aren't any of these sort of bridges that come into force, but rubber boats rule applies. On day 1, the Germans got the drop on the Allies. It was pretty much a total surprise, which is a massive failure of intelligence by the Allies. I believe they did get a few warnings, but they were ignored or never got passed to the right HQs. There's certainly some American soldiers along the front were reporting that they heard significant amounts of traffic being moved on the other side of these rivers the day before the attack. But to reflect the fact that there was a surprise, a lot of these HQs are already used on the first turn. And normally what happens is when a turn starts, all your HQs go onto their unused side and they become available for activation. But to reflect the total surprise and the inability of the Americans to respond effectively to this attack, a lot of the American units are already marked as used, so they can't do anything on the first turn. Now, just let me check that. There might be something about you might be able to use the second activation, but just ignore that for the moment. If it's there, I'll take account of that when the game starts. Germans, or their infantry units, are available. All their HQs are available on the first turn. There are a few Panzer units knocking around, but like the 12th SS, Piper's Armoured Group, 1st SS, elements of Panzer Lehr and stuff like that, but all their HQs tend to be already used, reflecting the fact, well, it mainly reflects the fact the horrendous traffic problems the Germans had getting any of their mechanised units to the front line on the day of the attack. In fact, there's only one Panzer unit here. I think there's only one that's available for use. But even then, they can't cross the river because they'd need a bridge to cross, even just a river, right? Never mind a major river. So I don't think the 2nd SS can do much anyway. Anything else you want to say? There's a few oddities and rules in the special rules. I've put these little sticker things here to just to remind me. It's just Volk's Grenadier units do have reconnaissance units, even though they're not clearly marked as with the reconnaissance NATO symbol. I'm just seeing if I can see one. I can't, to be quite honest. Not that it matters. They are designated VOR. Tiger units. This covers quite a few different types of Tigers: Jag Tigers, King Tigers, Standard Tigers, Tiger 1s, where they're mechanically unreliable and you can end up losing some of your armoured strength if you make a bad roll. What else we got? There's stuff that Allied air supply can be used. It can be used to affect a snafu roll. There's a few other rules under that. It's under 3.2, so I've just noted that don't forget about your Allied air supply if you've got air units available, because you can sacrifice air units to do certain things. We've got the Griff units here. These are like little counters that you can play. They represent the German special forces units that crossed the border, and they were dressed as American troops, and they were there to basically seize things like bridges and move signposts and things like that. Just generally to cause a snafu, really, in the rear areas. You can use them to affect snafu rolls, and you can use those counters to affect bridge blowing rolls as well. So you've got 5 of them. Once they're consumed, they're gone. There are special rules for the German paratroopers that the Germans did their last paradrop of the war. It was actually a disaster, and it resulted in virtually the annihilation of the airborne units that were dropped. So looking at this game, the Germans got a long way to go, and admittedly the American forces are weak, but they can act as a blocking force. There are important areas to consider when you're advancing forward, and one of the most obvious is this place, Bastogne. There are 7 roads actually meet at the town of Bastogne, so it became a critical point of the battle. The Americans managed to get the 82nd Airborne, I think it was, into this area before the Germans, so they managed to retain control of that crucial road junction there. Other important places are Vith up there, which is another road junction. So all in all, yeah, another thing that's worth considering is the weather. The weather is poor because this is in December, January. You can have normal ground terrain, mud, frost, and then you get your weather, which affects your air units, that affects your movements, your terrain. So I get that focus on that. That terrain affects the movement, cost of things, that reflects your air power coming in, and this is your visibility. Now this is quite interesting. Having played Valley of Tears was always sunny weather, and because it was in a desert, and you always had a 4 hex visibility range. Now here it's often down, it's down to 1 in certain things, or 2 occasionally. I know it says any there, because the range of the Second World War units is, I think, the maximum zone 2. So you don't really have to consider ranges above that. So because of that, it's going to restrict the effectiveness of our armour, unless the weather's pretty good. You know, these Tigers with their long range guns and things like that aren't actually going to be that sort of effective. Yes, even American armour has got a range of 2. Sorry, no, that isn't one with a range of 2. Yeah, there's some armour there with its range of 2. I guess in this game, the deployed side, yeah, this is similar to what happens in Valley of Tears for the Egyptian units, that in their mobile side they don't have a range. The range only comes into effect when they're in their deployed combat side. Israelis didn't have that problem, that they had a combat range on both sides. Trying to think about this. Anything else I want to say? I don't think so. So yeah, we will go on a bit more. We'll have a look at the components, and obviously the maps are beautiful. No complaints about the maps at all. One thing I will say is with the American units, because they're green and there's a lot of green on this map, they sort of tend to blend into the map a lot. This makes them not that easy to see, and there is one criticism that quite a few people have of this. This is as far as I know, the only one of the series where there's no divisional stripe on the counters. So that's going to make things difficult, telling which unit's which. You're just going to have to go off the lettering, which gives the unit type on the right, not the unit type, the unit division or formation on the right. That's a shame, because the stripe method is far better. It makes it a lot easier to play the game, because the activations by unit, and you need to be able to know what counters are in that unit. Anyway, that's a minor thing. I'm using the BCS rules version 2 and the charts from Valley of Tears. Anything else? Yeah, the stuff that comes with the game's pretty adequate. One thing I would criticise is this terrain's effects chart. That's very, very old-fashioned. That should be. I prefer a visual thing. There's something, if you go way over here, you can see visually what the stuff is, but then you have to go off to a chart like this to look it up. It would have been better if this chart had been a play aid where you could see it quite clearly visually which terrain types what. Excuse me, moving things around. The actual special rules for this, I've already talked about most of the special rules. Oh yeah, I'm going to use the historical weather rules, because I think using a random weather rule, if the Allies got their full air support on the first couple of days, it could radically change the outcome of this battle. Yeah, just compared to Valley of Tears, there's hardly any special rules, which is a huge relief, because I found that the area I was making the most mistakes was the special rules for Valley of Tears. Right, anyway, this video is getting quite long, so we'll see you in the game.